This podcast is recorded using Riverside.fm, which makes it super easy to have studio quality recordings and lightning fast editing. Riverside is a virtual studio that makes recording and editing at the highest possible quality available to anyone. All you have to do is give your guests a link and Riverside does the rest. Riverside records each participant as a separate audio and video track, which means everyone on your show is going to look and sound great. You can download these tracks separately, or you can use their dedicated editor to fine-tune your podcast. You can edit via selecting text, just like you're editing a document. Riverside also has tools to improve your audio quality. It uses AI to focus on who's talking at any time, and they bring out new features all the time. I've used so many different tools for podcasting, but Riverside is essential. It makes everything easy so you can focus on your show, not the process. If you want to know more, you can check out the link in the description down below. But for a deep dive on Riverside.fm and how I use it to make the NerdNest podcast, click on the top link in the description down below. And a big thank you to Riverside for sponsoring this episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to the NerdNest podcast. I'm Bill. That guy right over there is Russ. How's it going, Russ?
Good. You know, it's Sunday here, but it's a little bit rainy in Hawaii right now. We've got the smatterings of a hurricane happening, but nothing big. It's like, I think I was joking with somebody earlier. They're like, our weatherman the other day in the morning news was like, hey folks, you guys have to pay attention to me today. Like, this is a real thing, And so I thought that was pretty funny because everyone just ignores that kind of stuff usually. So
it's kind of like, I went to go see Twisters, and at one point in the movie, like, there's spoilers, there's a tornado, and the protagonists run into a place and they're like, we got to get underground, and this person is like, this happens all the time, there's no tornado. And of course there is, but it's just like that feels like the same thing that you're talking about. Have you seen that movie yet?
I haven't yet. I honestly never saw the first one. I don't know. It's like, I don't like movies about weather. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know.
It's not about weather. It's about people.
Yeah, I understand. But I want to see science fiction, like time travel, like those kind of things are like super cool to me. When it's just like, hey, the studio has created a fake tornado for everyone to chase or whatever. I'm like, nah. I don't know.
That's fair enough. Well, anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about video games, and I wanted to start off with our headline topic, which is that Square Enix, at least like the director of Final Fantasy 16, which just got a demo on PC. Spoilers, not a great demo, at least for optimization wise, but they said something in an interview that I thought was really, really interesting. And they were talking to Games Radar, and the director, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Hiroshi Takai, they said they were asked whether or not the future games from Square are going to be coming to a PC day and date with their console releases. And the reason why they're being asked this is because Square had recently, I think it was at the beginning of July, they had like this they had this realization that limiting themselves to only customers that have a PlayStation console was hurting the sales of their games. And in the past they've made a lot of arguments saying, look, if we only have to optimize our games for one system, that reduces the costs of making these games, and then we can port it over afterwards. Well, they didn't like how that was going for them, so about a month and a half ago, they said, we're going to definitely start bringing our games to other platforms as well, including PC. Well, he was asked about this by Games Radar, and here's what he said. He said, I think that it's possible for these long-term franchises to see PC on day one. I think that that's possible, possibly even likely. I think that's possible. Oh, I already said that. That said, the team in charge of each project gets to decide its own policy. This is just my personal opinion. So a lot of people would click on the headline that says the Final Fantasy 16 director says that PC games are going to be day and date with console games. and they read the headline and moved on. He says, well, most of the time that's probably going to be true, but there might be cases where the people who are in charge of a specific game might say, no, we're not going to do that. But they might get some downward pressure from people up above. That's the other part that it said in the video. And I thought this is a really good discussion topic for two reasons. Number one, you and I both have PS5s. We both have PCs. And my question to you is, if they do that, are you going to buy your Square Enix games on PS5 or on PC?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, the article itself, looking at the quotes, is very like nuanced, which doesn't work well in gaming culture, because he's like,
No.
I think it's possible, probably even likely, right? Like all he is saying is that there is a likelihood of it, right? But man, just the headlines is just kind of very typical of like gamer culture, So I get all that, So I'm not expecting this day in day out for every Final Fantasy from here on out, right? Like it's just kind of like they're speculating, But if we saw console and PC release of Final Fantasy games in particular, day and date, I will never probably ever buy it on console at that point. I would only buy it on PC because of the convenience factor, the Steam Cloud, the ability to be able to, like, I'm going to resume my game on this handheld and kind of move over, and that I found myself, I've never been a huge gamer, around Xbox 360 eras when I got back into games from like GameCube and PS2 era, and even though those are just like one generation to the next, there was a huge like 5-year gap for me there. Anyway, when I got into that, very much console gamer, and then I kind of fell out of console gaming because of the inconvenience of having to be in front of my couch in order to play it. You know what I mean? And that just like dropped. Like I had so much work to do at some point, once I had made Master Chief in like 2015, like everything just dropped off. I was like just doing work. And then I was also writing cookbooks. So just didn't play games. And then now with like PC gaming, like kind of resurging after the pandemic and whatnot, especially, in my circle, I'm playing more games than ever, and it's because of the convenience of like Steam Cloud and just the ability to jump in and out, and so if I have the choice for Final Fantasy in particular, this is a system where I feel like I'm such a fickle person when it comes to role-playing games. Everything has to be perfect for me to play. Steam is going to be the place for me. There are other games I would rather play on console. I think I'll always want to play God of War on console, but I don't know about PC side, especially for Final Fantasy. I think this is a really cool move, and I for sure put Final Fantasy 16 on my wish list for PC, and I never did on PS5, so that probably says it right there.
Yeah, I personally am really torn about this because of the quality of Square Enix ports in the past. Like a lot of times when they port their games for PC, they suffer from poor optimization, really, really bloated file sizes, of a limitation of options for that you normally get on PC. So like you can't really customize it the way that you can most PC games. And it always felt like they were doing the minimum that they possibly could do in order to make the game to come over to PC. Now, I've seen good ports from them and I've seen bad ports from them. I've only played the demo for Final Fantasy 16, and that port, we talked about it last week. It ran fine on my laptop, ran like garbage on pretty much all of the handhelds that I used. That being said, I was also running Bazite on my ROG Ally X, which has like the best stats. So that might be the reason why that didn't run so well. And it could be like Proton things that I could change in order to fix all that. But the fact that in the past we've seen so many not great ports from them makes me not sure where I will buy these games in particular if they come day and date on PC and PS5 and hopefully Xbox and every other platform like whatever the new Nintendo system is. I would really like them to be wherever so everybody gets a chance to play those games, but I cannot make a decision about where I will buy these games. And I'm very curious to anybody who's listening to this on your favorite podcast player or watching this over at youtube.com/nerdnest. I would love to hear where you guys would buy your games. Would you buy them on PS5 for Square Enix games? Would you buy them on PS5 or would you buy them on PC? Because I think it's easy to say this is what I'll do, but there's definite drawbacks to both sides of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, my only experience with Final Fantasy games in particular on PC is Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I thought played fine, but I jumped into it years after it had been released. And so there may have been some optimizations at that point and bugs worked out. And so I didn't experience any of that. And so I was thinking to myself, well, that's probably how I would play Final Fantasy 16 as well, is that I'm in no urgency. They're all self-contained stories. And so I have no urgency to like jump into that and find out what happened from the last one. Like that's not a thing. Whereas with God of War, like Ragnarok, I bought that day and date. I took 3 days off from the channel and just played that game, because I wanted to find out what happened. I've been waiting years. And so that's a different experience for me. But then the other thing I was thinking was, well, if, I hate to say there should be another game store or any of that kind of stuff, or game service. But man, when I can jump into Destiny 2 on my PS5 or my Xbox or my PC and resume my character and everything that I've done, like, with each platform, that's amazing. And that would make me, if they had something like that where you cross saves, I would probably buy on both, to be honest. I would spend the $150 or whatever it's going to be, because then if I'm in the mood for a couch session, like I got a big battle coming up, I want to see this in 4K on my 55-inch screen, like I want to do that on my couch. And then I'll get my grinding done on PC or whatever. Like I would pay that premium. I would pay for it twice if it's a game I'm really into, to be able to have both, But in this environment, it's so rare that we see cross saves. Diablo 4 is the only other one I can think of where I bought it on PS5 because I was like hemming and hawing because you guys were all into it. And you're like, oh, like Carrie's like, Diablo 4 is the best thing ever, And so and that lasted like 2 weeks from him. But right, exactly. And so I bought it and I was like, all right, where am I going to buy it? And I was like, PS5. I want to have like a full big screen experience because the characters are so small or whatever, But man, later on I bought it on Steam for like $30 on sale, and my character moved over, and I was like, this is amazing. Like I want everything to be like that. And I didn't mind that I bought it twice, And so that's what I would like to see, the ability to have both, even if I have to pay for it 2 times.
Yeah, I personally, I would like it. I mean, this is pie in the sky. I would like it if you could just buy it once and then you have like an account, and then the game itself is free. You pay X dollars for the account, and then the game itself is free, and you can install it as many times as you want. A perfect example of this, which is something we'll talk about later on in the show, is World of Warcraft. I have it on PC and I have it on Mac, and it works great on both, but I only ever had to buy the thing once. Whereas with Final Fantasy 14, which is the MMO, like it's like the World of Warcraft version of the Final Fantasy version of World of Warcraft, you have to buy that on a per device basis. So, you bought the first one on your PS4, but then you decided to play it on PC. You have to buy the whole thing all over again, even though you already have an account. So I don't see Square Enix doing that. But something else that I thought of while you were talking was it's possible that all of these issues that we've seen in the past with, and I'm going to put in quotes, bad ports, all these issues that we've seen in the past with bad ports, maybe that's because they weren't day and date and they're porting something that they made after the fact. So like you build a thing, and then when you go to port it to a new system, there's like a bunch of new problems that you suddenly have that you may have been able to solve if you were building it with multi-platform in mind from the start. So maybe it would be even better.
Yeah, that makes sense. The other thing I was thinking about this is, the whole cross compatibility thing. Like that's probably one of the bigger benefits of Game Pass Ultimate, because they do that. It's basically the same thing. There are games that don't work like that. I mentioned Hellblade last week, but for the most part, like Master Chief Collection, or not Master, yeah, even that, and then also Halo Infinite. Like all of those have that cross save thing, so I can boot it up PC, boot it up on Xbox, and I'm not paying for it twice. I'm just paying for the service. Like
Yeah.
all that makes sense to me. They just don't have those titles that like I actually want to play, you know, and that's probably one of the big problems is that like I want to play Final Fantasy, I want to play God of War, you know, like all these other games that are not available on the platform. So
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the games that we've been playing. Russ, what have you been playing, man?
So I have been doing a lot of testing. I've been working on this device, which I think we're going to talk about later. But like I've been building a shaders video, like basically like a guide to say, okay, when you're playing, like these are all the different things you can do to affect the screen to make it feel like an old TV, or if you want very crispy pixels, like these are all the options you have. So I've been playing like 2 minutes of every single game you can think of just to make sure that all those bezels are working. But the one game that like I've actually sat down and like, you know, got myself a little drink and I was like, all right, let's play this, was Deadlock. And so we're allowed to talk about this now. And so
That's right. It's officially announced.
yeah, I think it was yesterday or day before they were like, okay, you guys can now talk about this. So I got an invite, I think from Rich. Like it's one of those one person gets in and then they can send the invites out. And so I got an invite in and then I started playing it. And so this is like Valve's new, I don't know this genre very well, but it's a hero shooter, right? So it's like Overwatch or whatever, where you're in a team and you're like fighting and each person has their own skills. It reminds me of like Battlefield Bad Company. Like that's like what I was thinking of, like because that's like how far back my multiplayer shooting games go, you know. It's like Xbox 360. And so it's like where you've got a medic and you got your other guys, you know. Team Fortress was kind of like that as well. I got that in the orange box, so I played that a little bit. This one's okay. I don't know. I like third person games that are like multiplayer like that. I feel like I can see more. So I like the fact that I could see my character as I'm moving and stuff like that. So it's not so like tunnel vision like it is with like Valorant, you know. But yeah, I played a little bit and I was like, okay, I can see the merits of this. The thing I wanted to mention is that it actually works pretty well on Steam Deck. Surprise, surprise, made by Valve. And so, yeah,
really? Because when
that's
I
the
went
only
to
thing I
use
played
it,
on.
oh well, wait, did you do any matchmaking? Like, did you play online?
No, I don't like doing that stuff.
Okay. So when you go to play online, it says, "Sorry, you can't join online matchmaking on a Steam Deck yet." So like I wasn't able to actually play against people on the Steam Deck. And I think that's probably because they don't have controller stuff like properly mapped yet.
Yeah, it was I'm just doing the bots practice stuff, you know, like I didn't get very far in it, you know. And I generally just don't like playing against other humans because it like stresses me the heck out, you know. And so I just like practicing, you know, and just getting a feel for it. I will say that it felt more like a mouse and keyboard game that had controller support like slapped on. It didn't feel as much like just a very smooth feeling. It felt like I was it's like it reminds me of when you can try, you know, you can play like PC ports of or Linux ports of like Duke Nukem and Doom and stuff on handhelds. Like people will port it over and it never feels right because it's not made with game control, like controller support in mind. It kind of felt a little bit like that, but performance wise, it was fine. I think I was like around the 40 frames per second or 50 maybe. It was enough where I was like, okay, I got a feel for it and I'm not getting bogged down. So
nice. Just going to do a quick correction so that people don't correct you in the comments section. Yes, it is a hero shooter, but it's also a MOBA, which means that there's this extra layer of map strategy that you have to contend with when you're playing because you have like these different lanes that you have to like basically I think there's 5 lanes in the game. It might be 4. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's 5 lanes, and based on what character you're playing, you'll be better at certain jobs that you have to do, like defending a tower or pushing a lane and that kind of stuff. So I would say it mixes all of the games that you mentioned before with games like Dota 2 or League of Legends or Heroes of the Storm or Smite or Paragon. And this one feels more like Paragon than the others. So it's not actually a hero shooter, but that's the thing that most people refer to it as because it the moment to moment gameplay feels like a hero shooter, even though there's that extra layer on top.
Yeah.
I really love that genre. However, the thing that I will say is my favorite one is Heroes of the Storm, because the matches are not nearly as long as they are. Because you would get into, like, I don't know, Paragon, and a match would go an hour and a half or an hour or something like that, like something crazy. And Heroes of the Storm matches were usually over in like 15 or 20 minutes. And that was because, and the reason I like that is because I'm old, I have responsibilities. There's a lot of times where I have to just stop what I'm doing and go do something else. And if I'm leaving an hour-long match at the end of 55 minutes because I had to get up and go, that is really frustrating. Where it's not nearly as frustrating if I played 20-minute matches and then finished them and then was able to get up and go. I haven't played enough of, is it Deathlock or Deadlock? I can never remember.
I think it's Deadlock.
Okay.
I gotta look it up.
I haven't played enough of Deadlock to really get a feel for how long the matches are.
Yeah, Deadlock.
Deadlock, okay. But I do hope that it has mechanics in it that make the matches shorter. And I also, there's one other thing about MOBAs that I generally don't like. Well, again, that I think that Heroes of the Storm did best, is that your team levels as a team. So if you and I are playing and you're just laying waste to people, you're not level 12 and I'm level 5, because that means that I can't keep up. But if you're laying waste to people and I kind of suck, I get carried just a little bit so that I still feel like I can contribute. Because when you play those MOBA games, there's lots of times where you might get killed a bunch of times in the early game and then you just can never catch up, which feels really bad in an hour-long match. So that's just the one thing that or a couple of things that I worry about with that genre. But done right, that genre can be really, really fun.
That makes sense. So I didn't really understand MOBAs. I still kind of don't, because I've never really played any of those. But the thing that I kept thinking about was like, oh, this is kind of like Dynasty Warriors, where you're just kind of like, there's lots of people coming and you're just kind of pushing and sometimes you lose ground, sometimes you gain it, and so that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, oh, this is like Dynasty Warriors, and that you're kind of gaining like a strategic advantage or whatever, tactical advantage at that point. So yeah,
very cool. The game that I've been playing this week is World of Warcraft. I picked up my subscription again, and the new expansion comes out. If you paid extra, you're already playing the new expansion. If you didn't pay extra, I didn't pay extra. So I'm just playing like the regular version right now, and it unlocks in like 2 days or something like that for the new version. But I'm like trying to catch up because I haven't played in 2 expansions. And the thing that I wanted to talk about is, I was listening to an episode of The Instance, which is a podcast all about World of Warcraft that's been going it went for 16 years, and then they stopped because they stopped playing. And then they just released a new episode. They went to, like, Scott Johnson went to Blizzard HQ. He met with Chris Metzen. They talked about the game and everything, and now they're bringing that podcast back. And I was listening to an episode because I didn't know much about what's new in this expansion. I just knew that I had the itch to play an MMO. And there's some really cool single player things that are in the expansion now that I think might even make it appeal to you, Russ. So you can now go into dungeons by yourself with a bunch of AI party members. So you can go into the dungeon, you could say, all right, I'm going to be a healer. I like to help people. So I'm going to go into this dungeon as a healer, and I'm going to bring in AI party members with me, and the tank is going to tank the thing that I'm going to fight. The DPS are going to kill the thing that I'm going to fight, and I'm just going to keep everybody alive. And I got to say, like, one of my favorite things to do in World of Warcraft is go into dungeons. But a lot of times you get paired up with people who are just in a rush to... I'm sure you experience it with Destiny, where they're just like, they take off because they've done it a billion times and they're just there to get the points that they need so that they can buy the next thing that they want, or hopefully get some kind of loot that they're hoping for that drops in this dungeon. But being able to go in on your own and just kind of do it at your own pace, and you can, if you don't know where to go, you can tell the NPCs, hey, you be in charge and I'm going to follow you and just do my job in
That's
here.
awesome. Yeah.
Isn't that awesome? Like, that's something that makes it really, really compelling. And then for me, as somebody who hates mouse and keyboard, it's a mouse and keyboard game, I also installed a program called Console Port, which allows you to use your favorite controller. I'm using my PlayStation PS5 controller. Allows you to use that, and you play on a controller. And it's just like, I've been sitting back and playing and slowly leveling up, because I think my highest character is like level 40 or something. And I'm really enjoying it, especially because there's so much story that I missed. I'm really enjoying it. And there's something I guess was added in the last expansion that I never experienced, is like this time walking thing, where they completely reset how WoW works. So now when you log into like a new character or whatever, you go to the main city of your faction, and the faction leader will be like, hey, go talk to this person. You talk to that person. They're like, which story do you want to go through? And then they list all of the expansions, and you can do any one, no matter which one you want. It scales to whatever level you are. So you can go through that story, experience the story, which is awesome in World of Warcraft, and then come out and do the next one afterwards. And it's really, really fun. And I've been having a blast with it, and I can't wait to play more of it. Have you ever played WoW?
Not at all, but that does sound pretty interesting. Like I had a lot of issues with Destiny 2. Like, so I had a group of friends. We were playing together in Destiny 1 before we kind of all fell off. But like, they were the type of gamers, like you were talking previously, where they had already been doing it and they had watched YouTube videos and read stuff about it or whatever. And so when I would get in, we'd be like, all right, let's do this raid or whatever, like King's Fall or whatever. And so we jump into this raid, and they'd be like, okay, Russ, stand there. And I'm just like, why? You know what I mean? Like, I want to know the story. Like, why are we here? Who are we fighting? Like all those things. Like, we're supposed to be doing a raid, And they're just like, stand here and then shoot this thing 15 seconds after this appears. Like that's what they're doing, right? And I'm just like, and so I got through some of those raids, but I don't know what happened. I don't understand any of those things. I learned more from a Wikipedia page about it than I do from like playing with those guys. And so that's not the experience I truly like enjoy. I had some amazing moments with those guys, like, where like I didn't think we would be able to beat it because I'm so terrible at games or whatever, and we did. Like, that was amazing, but that's different than the story that the writers made, And so I love this idea with WoW. It's like, okay, here is like everything we've ever done, and like choose which story you want to do. In Destiny 2, it's like, oh gosh, you open up that main screen, it's all the planets, and you're like, what do I do now? You know what I mean? Like, how do I just start shooting things? And so I've learned to touch on a couple of the planets, and I've not played a lot of those expansions, mostly because I don't have a team to like team up with and play that stuff, and I don't have the time. But like, I love the idea with WoW, where it's like, hey, new person, here we're going to hold your hand through this. And I like that AI idea as well, like the idea of like not having to rely on everyone else's schedules or jumping in with strangers. You can just kind of build your own story, which again is like, that's kind of the whole D&D thing. It's like where you create that yourself, that we talked about that last week with Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah. Another thing that I really like about it is they looked at what Square Enix did with Final Fantasy XIV, where they would label quests a certain way. So like, if you want to progress the main story forward, this is the quest that you want to follow. And if you, but in addition to that, you'll go into these areas, and then you'll have like an area quest where like you go into like a small fishing village or whatever, and they're like, the Murlocs have been attacking us. We need you to take care of that. And so those will have different quest icons to help you keep track of, okay, these are the ones that take care of the overall story that I got sent here from the little time traveling dragon lady. She sent me here to do this stuff. But while I'm here, there's also area quests or area stories that I can experience that are smaller, and like there's there's also add-ons that add voiceover to like a bunch of quests and stuff, where like they just went through and they voice acted stuff so that you can have them talking to you while you're doing so. It's a much better experience. And I also feel like they've taken down a lot of the requirement to spend a ridiculous number of hours in order to really get anything out of it. The leveling progress is much faster than it used to be, and there's still unlimited number of hours that you can easily put into that game, but you don't feel like you have to anymore. Whereas in the past, like when I was hardcore playing WoW, you really had to put in the time in order to be able to do anything, and that's not really the case anymore. So I'm having a blast with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have fond memories of like 2007, 2008. I feel like that was like a really big moment in WoW, you know? And the reason why I know that is because like my sailors, like the people who worked for me, they would just be tired all the time because they were just playing it so much, you know? You got to remember I was like in intelligence, you know? So it's like nerds. And so they are just like, they're trying to get out of work early. And I'm like, why are you guys trying to get out of work early? It's like, because we can go home and like play WoW and eat pizza rolls or whatever, you know? And yeah, like the productivity in our office in those years was so bad because I had to deal with so many like WoW related issues. There were sailors who didn't want to go on deployment because they're like, well, I want to have access to my like internet and WoW and all that stuff. Like, dude, you're the Navy, like you got to go on a ship, you know? And so it's just kind of funny, like that really was like a cultural phenomenon at that point.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was in the Army stationed in Hawaii, me and a trio of guys in my office, we didn't play World of Warcraft because it wasn't out yet, because I don't think it came out until 2001. But we played Ultima Online, and we would come into work, and we would obviously do our work, but we would also talk about what we were going to do when we got home that night after our shift, and go into that world and play it with our friends. And there's something to be said about an MMO kind of game where when you talk about video games, most of the time people talk about, oh, well, you know, we did this in the game, we did this in the game. But when you talk about an MMO and you're playing with people that you know, it feels far more immersive. You know, you're looking at a screen or whatever, but it feels far more immersive when you're playing those games. So that's why MMOs are always like my favorite genre, even though I don't get to play them very much, because you can really only play one at a time. Yeah,
absolutely. No, it's a really fascinating thing, you know, just in this day and age. Like you know, as kids, we used to think, oh, in the future, they're going to have like virtual reality, like fantasy worlds, and you live in there, you know, like this whole Lawnmower Man thing or whatever. And we're pretty close, you know. It's not that we're not strapping on our VR or whatever, but that experience is kind of there, you know. It's available if you want it. Now, not everybody's diving into it like the whole Ready Player One thing where people are living within the Oasis or whatever, but it's you know, the internet as a whole, people are kind of living in it right now, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. You've been playing anything else, or do you want to move on to the retro topic today?
That was it. Yeah, I'd love to talk about retro things.
All right. So this is the Anbernic 40 XXV. People in my comments got mad at me for calling it XX. They want me to say XX. I don't know. Whatever. But this thing is absolutely fantastic. I like this way more than I thought I would, but I want to hear what you think about this first.
You know, I've got a long history with this shape. So the Anbernic made their first like big vertical handheld. It was called the RG351V. And to be honest, the front shell is almost identical. Like they had a single analog stick. It had controls like this. They were much worse. And it was a lot fatter. Like it had like, you know, big part right here. And then also these stuck out a bunch. So
that's the one that looks like it's made out of wood, right?
Yeah, the Wood Boy. Yeah. And so that one came out, 2001 at some point. I think maybe mid-year. I can't remember. But it's been a few years, you know, at this point.
Did you say 2001?
2021, sorry.
Oh,
2021.
Okay.
Yeah, not 2001. Sorry. See, I'm thinking about old times, you know, talking about World of Warcraft, but not 2021. So about 3 years, you know. And I was torn about it. A lot of people loved it. And I was just like, that was my first real vertical handheld. And I was like, it's so weird to hold my hands like this while playing, like it was just crampy. I was used to a horizontal handheld. And so I just couldn't see the point in it. And I was like, I'm not a vertical kind of guy. I've grown more fond of the form factor. But I did play that one a lot, and I played it on its side because I could like play in bed and I could be like this, because it's like not a big horizontal. And so I was like, oh, this is a perfect like bed handheld, or I could just have it rest like this and then use one finger to like press the buttons or whatever. So I played through the first two Phoenix Wright games on Nintendo DS on that 351V. So I played that a lot, and so this feels like a superior version in almost every single way. Like the controls are better. It's a lot more flush. It feels more streamlined. The bezels are so much better. There's a lot that I really like about this handheld, even if I'm not like a vertically oriented kind of guy, I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, same here. And the bezels, I mean, when you turn the screen on and you look at this thing, like the bezels are so tiny. It is really like... It's great. And that's a big 4-inch screen, and it's a very nice screen. It gets pretty bright, and it doesn't get as dim as I think a lot of people would like, right. But I don't really care about that because I'm never playing in a completely dark room. And even if I am, I want to see those super, super bright colors on this thing. So Ambernick sent me the white one. And by the way, both Russ and I got these for free, but this isn't an ad. They sent me the white one. I never would have picked the white one, but when I opened up the box, I was like, oh, that looks really, really nice. Which one did you get?
So they sent me the white and then what they call indigo blue, which is kind of like a purplish blue. I knew I wanted the white one ahead of time. I actually, I had an analog pocket. I have the white one for that as well. And I was like, this is going to be perfect for comparisons, because they are of a similar size and whatnot. I like this clean look, like white on white. I'm a little bit worried, it's not like Ambernick is using like industrial grade, like perfected plastics. And so I'm assuming this will yellow over time, especially that analog stick, it's a cheap little analog stick. And so I feel like that one's going to turn yellow before the rest of the shell, and that's going to look awkward. But right now, yeah, it is looking amazing. I really like that clean look. The indigo blue I'm not a huge fan of because of that kind of hue to it. I think that the bright blue of the 40XXH that came out like last month or whatever, I like that blue better than the one that's on the vertical one because it's just a little bit off in terms of that like purplish, which I think people like. But I really like that like deep blue that we had in the last one.
So one of the first things I noticed when I opened this is, and maybe this is just something that's in my head, but the plastic that they used on this feels soft to the touch, not in a bad way. It feels very soft as I'm holding it. Is that something that you noticed, or am I just making that up?
No, the texture here is good. Like I didn't like it on the last one. It was too slick and just shiny. This one has got more texture to it, a little bit grippy. I would say it's almost powdery, and that kind of feeling, and that's what I like. It's not quite as powdery as some others that I've seen before. Like their transparent models usually have a little bit more grit to them, but I think this is just about perfect. And again, the 351V was like almost slick by comparison, which I didn't like. And so I think they did a really good job on the plastic. And we're talking about like a $60-$70 handheld, which is just kind of crazy. Like the other one, that 351V was like $110 when it came out, and it's less powerful than this one. And it's just kind of the span of time, and how things go with electronics. But it is amazing that we're getting so much value with this. A lot of people are complaining, oh, it's the same chip as we saw before. I'm like, yeah, it's they're following along the same model of giving you the same performance, the same firmware, the software options that you have, and then a different form factor. And so if this one appeals to you more, then you can get that one. The problem is that they just trickle these out. And so you might have already bought one, like the SP, same chip and all that stuff, right? You might have bought that one because you're like, oh, I'd really like a vertical, but this is pretty close. So I'm going to get this one, right? And then the vertical comes out and you're like, and so in a perfect world, if they were not thinking the way that they do, they would have said, okay, here's the next line of devices. Here are these 7 different form factors that you can get. Do you want one with 2.8 inches, 3.5 inches, 4 inches? Here they all are. Here are all the prices. Go for it. You know what I mean? And I think that would have been like this cool like phenomenon. Like, oh, which one are you going to get? And I can collect them all or whatever. That would have been really cool. But the way they trickle it out is kind of this it's great if you just now jump into it and you're like, oh, I've never heard about these things. Let me try it out. Oh, look at that, 7 options. But for us, it's like, holy crap, like another one, you know? So I often have to pull myself back from that lens of like, you know, it's just another handheld, you know, and really think about the fact that they're providing another form factor, which is cool. It's just the timing of it kind of sucks.
Well, okay. So speaking of the timing, you put out a video, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or maybe 2 weeks ago called The One, where you made like a big deal talking about the 35XXSP. Oh, I'm sorry, the 35XXSP. As people can stop yelling at me. Nah, yell at me, I don't care. Is that still the one, or because this bigger screen, like once I got it on the 4-inch screen, I was just like, I don't know how often I'll use the SP.
Yeah, it's the SP is still the one because this is more travel friendly. You know what I mean? I will throw this in my pocket. I will take it wherever. I've had both now for like a week, and I still will grab this one when we're gonna go run an errand or whatever. But at home, like this is like my home device now. Like I can, I get the 4 inches. You know, it's better, but it's not something I want to throw in my pocket and take around town. And so the SP is still it, but I can still see the value in the V one as well. And so, yeah, it's hard. I don't think I want a 4-inch of this one either. Even though I like that 4-inch screen, I think this is just big enough, you know. And so I don't want it any bigger. But we'll see. They'll probably make one.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure that they will. What would you change anything about this one? For the people who are listening, not watching, I held up the new vertical one.
The V. I'm trying to think, you know, I think this needs time because right now there's only 2 custom firmwares available for it, which is amazing. And another reason why using the same chipset is actually a good thing because there already was another 4-inch display device that came out, the horizontal one. And so those firmwares work on this one, which is great. But the one that I want to play the most on it is Moo OS or Mustard OS. And that one is not available on the 4-inch devices yet. When that one comes out, that's one thing that I want. So I need more time with that. And that's mostly because of Sync Thing, which is like the ability to like, you know, share your saves and stuff. It's possible with Newly, which is the other operating system, but the way they save their games is different, and so you'd have to restructure everything, and I don't want to do that. Anyway, so I need that, like I need time, and then also I think if I don't need like this little shelf, let me see if I can get it there. I don't need this shelf right here. Like I get it. It probably gives you more space to put your finger on or whatever, but I would rather have it flush, and it's just kind of me. Like I like to be able to just set it flat, like the Analog Pocket. I don't know. The DMG was like that. And so I would prefer to have like no lip right there. It's just a tiny little personal preference. I think I'd still be able to push the buttons. The Mio Mini Plus is flush, and I like that as well. So
the one thing that I would change about this is I would ditch the stick. Like for my video, I had N64 and Dreamcast stuff on here. But as soon as I finished my video, I removed N64 and Dreamcast stuff because I have no desire to play those games on a device like this. The Dreamcast might be okay for like Crazy Taxi or something like that, but the N64, you don't have the C buttons, and just having one stick and no C buttons, it's just like, it's really not the best way to play. So if it were up to me, ditch this crappy Nintendo Switch style stick that, like you said, is probably going to yellow before everything else. That would make it way more pocketable. It's a lot bigger, but it's also at its thickest point, it's thinner than the SP because the SP, you're folding the device in half. So if it didn't have that joystick on there, it would be easier to throw in your pocket and take with you. Although I have to admit, personally, when I go places, I don't bring any gaming devices with me because I'm usually doing something. I usually just play games at home and stuff. But that's what I would change about it. Anything else you want to say about the RG40XX-V before we move on?
No, I forgot about the stick because that's like my number one complaint about it, and I totally just blanked on it. But yeah, like I like having a stick. Like I do like to play like Mario 64 and these kind of devices and stuff. So I like having an analog input, but the stick on this actually sucks. You know, as far as its inputs, it doesn't have a good analog feel to it. So I do hope that they improve those sticks in the future. But otherwise, yeah, I like having the single stick. I play a lot of arcade games too, and I like to use a stick for that. You know, things like Final Fight or X-Men and stuff. And so, yeah, I'm good with a stick, but it's cool that they have the option. So,
yeah. I am all right. Let's move back to the news. And
Mm.
before we get to the news, I got a DM on Twitter from one of our listeners, Litzkrieg, who sent a couple of codes for one code for Baldur's Gate 1 Enhanced Edition. Great game, by the way. And then a second one for Planescape Tournament Enhanced Edition. Another really cool CRPG. They got it because there was a Humble Bundle and they already owned those games and they bought the Humble Bundle, which had a bunch of CRPG games in it. And I'll leave a link to the Humble Bundle down below. But if you leave a comment down below, um, about, your favorite, I don't know, your favorite old school RPG game, uh, leave a comment down below and I'll pick my favorite one and I will, my favorite two, and I will leave the codes behind for those people. Real quick, I will never tell you to DM me on Telegram or any of that stuff. So leave a comment down below, and I will reply to my favorite comments with one code for each of those two games. All right, next up, back to the news. We've got a few months ago, Phil Spencer. Well, it was unveiled that Microsoft was going to bring 4 games to PlayStation and Nintendo because it wasn't working out the way that they had hoped. And so they were going to be bringing these games over. And one of the questions that was asked, because they hadn't said what the 4 games were, they had this podcast, and I'm putting that in quotes because it was not a podcast. It was like, it was a scripted discussion. But they had this scripted discussion where one of the people on there said, so is Indiana Jones going to be one of those games that's going to be one of the 4 games that's coming over? And Phil Spencer said, no, it's not. Well, it was just announced that Indiana Jones is coming to PS5. It's going to, I think the rumors are that it's coming next April, but it's been confirmed that it is coming to PS5. It was unveiled by Jeff Keighley at Gamescom in Germany. And a lot of people are like calling Phil Spencer a liar about this because he said that no, it's not. But he was answering the question, is Indiana Jones one of those 4 initial games that are coming? And he said, no, this is not one of those 4 initial games that are coming. This is all those 4 games were already have come to other platforms. And now this is another game that's coming to multi-platform. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which is, I think it's probably the biggest gun that Microsoft has in their holster right now. Like, it's a huge IP and it looks really good. It's by Machine Gun Games, and I'm very, very hyped about that. The game is going to be on Xbox first. It's coming out this year. And then next year, I think in the first quarter, it will be coming to PS5. And this leads me to ask this question. Is there any reason to own an Xbox now? Because clearly all the games are coming.
I'll tell you, I have a Series S and an X, and I just never play them. I have the S here and then the X is at home. And I don't know, like I can see where you're saying, like, do we need to own an Xbox? PS5, I could make a good argument. Like, you need a PS5 if you want to play these games or whatever. It's just not available everywhere else, And so that's changing. We're seeing these releases later on, and then with Xbox, it's just a little bit more synergetic. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't, if somebody was like, I want to buy a console, what should I buy? And if they already had a PC or whatever, first thing I would probably say, get a PC, and try to see what you can do with that. And then after they're like, I want a home console, I would probably say, well, PS5 is going to be able to play all the games that you can't on your PC, Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, if you have an Xbox, there's lots of games that you can play, and Microsoft has a lot of IP that they now own, and those games are going to come to Xbox first, but they're not going to come to Xbox only. And a lot of people look at owning, like, most people aren't like us who have multiple consoles. Like, most people buy one console, and that is the console that they have. If they get a second one, it's usually a Nintendo Switch or, something from Nintendo, whatever the next thing is going to be. But most people only get one. And if somebody were to say, should I get an Xbox or a PS5? At this point, even though I do like the Xbox a lot, I would have a hard time recommending the Xbox to somebody. And it kind of cements to me that Microsoft is now just a publisher almost. Yes, they have their own hardware, but if their games are all going to be multi-platform, is there a reason to have it? And I think that is bad for the industry, because I feel like that hands too much power to Sony.
Right. And they're going to abuse it.
Well, I mean, if the shoe was on the other foot, Microsoft would be abusing it. Like, exactly. People are always like, well, Microsoft is a good guy and Sony's a bad guy, or vice versa if you're on the other side. That's not true. They're all bad guys that happen to make things that we like, So, like, they're these big corporations, and they're not in it for the art of making it. Yeah, there's some people who get into making games because they love making games, but none of those people make decisions. Like, the people who make all of the decisions are usually, I like to call them spreadsheeters, because they just put up a spreadsheet and they mess around with stuff until all the numbers are black instead of red. And then they're like, we did it. We win. And I feel like I have always said that I want people to be able to play the games on the platform that they want to play on with the people that they want to play with. That's always been my position on this. But that also had like this idea that there was some checks and balances to keep companies from being too abusive. Because rewind to the Xbox One, when they unveiled the Xbox One, Microsoft was like, it's got to be on all the time, and it has this DRM, and you can't loan your games to other people. And then Sony at the same E3, they were like, all that stuff that Microsoft just said that you couldn't do, you can do on PS4. And that's, I think, the reason. It had nothing to do with the games. It was because PS4 was less restrictive. Now, if Sony wasn't there and Microsoft did that, then they would have, like, there wouldn't be any, they would have gotten away with it essentially. And now if Microsoft is shipping all of their games, which part of me thinks is a good thing because people can play on the system they want with the people they want, but it also gives too much power to Sony. And that makes me really nervous for the future of the industry.
I think it will definitely transform gaming as we think about it as consoles. We are slowly barreling towards that. If you think about like Genesis versus Super Nintendo, there were some crossovers, but not a lot, and even then they were different. You think about Aladdin or Mortal Kombat, like those games were different on each of those platforms. And so you really, like, back then, you had to make a decision if you only had so much money, right? It was like, okay, Sonic or Mario, like that's the decision you had to make at that point. Nowadays, we are getting closer and closer to not having to make that decision. Sony's still kind of keeping us in that position at this point, but Xbox is doing their best to kind of just blend all that together. It's amazing. It's amazing. Like, if you think about just like this ability to, like, I'm just going to buy a console and I'll be able to play most of the games, which is pretty cool,
Yeah.
And yeah, I can see that being a decision that's less and less important. But at the same time, yeah, it does leave room for abuse, in that, like, the company will be like, hey, let's, even the Xbox, like the stuff that they were coming up with the Xbox One is kind of normal right now, but it was just too close, too far ahead at the time, and so I totally get that now. I mean, people buying things without discs in them, like a console without discs, and they're like, oh, it's just not even thinking about that they can't loan those games or that stuff. It's not even a thing. But I totally get that. It's weird. If I had to pick each era, right, I would say between PS3 and Xbox 360, Xbox 360 had the titles at the time, the Halo and everything else. Then when it came to PS4, I feel like PS4 had the titles. I bought each of those consoles, but I usually would choose to wait for a while. Like, PS3 is a great example. I waited till later, and I was just when I couldn't wait anymore to play Uncharted. Like those were the things that like kind of pushed me. And it's going to be a really interesting world 5 years from now if we're still doing this podcast and we're talking about this thing, and whether or not it's PlayStation versus Xbox, or it's just like PlayStation and we're all arguing and being mad about that. And then there's just everything else, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Do you think the existence, I mean, Xbox and PlayStation put all their, I'm not going to say all, they put many of their games on PC as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like somebody might say, well, you've got the PC as the defense against the overreach of whatever is the primary console, like the most winning console of the time. If they happen to fly too close to the sun and their wings melt, well, we'll just all buy our games on PC then. But not everybody wants the complexity of having a PC when they could just buy a box, plug it into the HDMI on the back of their TV, and be done. Do you think the PC is enough to keep the overreaching at bay?
I think, God, that's a good question. I don't know if PC will keep consoles in check. I think, like we've talked about before, I think the Xbox will become a PC. That it'll just be like blended completely. And so you will buy a game and be able to play that directly on your Xbox or your PC. And we kind of can do that right now, but it is still a differentiating factor. I think that's the only success or win that Microsoft has if they're going to continue down this path, is to make a PC that you can plug into your TV. That's basically what we're looking at. And at that point, it becomes PlayStation versus everyone else.
Yeah, and then, Rich usually calls the Steam Deck, he says that's PC2, or maybe it's Carrie that says that. I can't. One of those guys usually says Steam Deck is PC2. It's like the sequel to PC. And I kind of look at, last week we talked about the fact that Windows games showed up inexplicably on the Xbox store for some reason, and it was a bug that they fixed.
Whoops.
Whoops. But that makes it kind of feel like PC 2.0. Like, it feels like it's almost in the same category with the Steam Deck. It's just not a handheld. And that makes it kind of compelling. Like, if you can just buy a box and have access to a PC store and have one cable that plugs into the back to get it on your TV, that's compelling. Do you feel like that's what Xbox is going to do, or do you feel like it might be too late for them?
I think that that's the direction they're going in. I think that that's what we will see, is some sort of like blended experience, where it's essentially just a PC that you will put under your TV, and it'll be a little bit truncated in that, you probably can still get to a desktop environment like with SteamOS, But the interesting thing about that is if they make that, okay, what's then stopping Valve from making one? What's stopping Asus from making one? You know what I mean? Like that's going to be the really interesting thing. If it's just a PC at that point, why can't the other PC makers make one as well? And then we're getting into the whole like Panasonic 3DO thing where there's like multiple ones doing the same thing, and that just, they all fail. And so
can you give people a little context to the Panasonic 3DO content? Because most people might not be aware of what you mean by that.
So, in that era, which was like the Sega Saturn generation, so generation 5. So they had the Panasonic 3DO, and Panasonic kind of opened it up for other manufacturers to make them. And I can't remember which manufacturers did which, because it was such a flash in the pan. But the idea was that there were multiple different 3DO consoles. Some were like more movie focused, and others were like more gaming focused and whatnot. And they tried to expand and make this thing like just bringing in other people into it, basically. And it just failed. Like I never saw a 3DO in the wild. I'm sure Kerry had one because he had everything, but like I never played it, and so, but that was one of those things where it spread so thin with so many options that no one wanted any of those options. And so sometimes it is very good to have something very focused, and you're like, okay, plug this in, it'll play your games. Here are the games. The Steam Deck, I think, really capitalizes on that in the PC space and be like, hey, here's the console-like experience right here. So.
Well, Valve tried to do that with Steam machines back in the day, and it failed. But I think the reason that it failed was my memory is that they were pretty expensive. And B, they were Linux, and there weren't, like, Proton didn't really exist at least not at the quality that it is now. So you could essentially just easily play a Windows game on a Linux machine, and you don't really have to jump through. Very few hoops need to be jumped through in order to do that. They fell on their face the first time around. You seem to think, yeah, that's the thing that could happen in the future. For me, I mean, fingers crossed. I freaking hope so, because I want to have a Steam machine hooked up to my computer, and up to my TV. There's gonna be people who say, well, you can just hook up your Steam Deck now. Yeah, but I want something more powerful that doesn't have a screen, especially thanks to Steam Cloud Saves, because that just makes the whole multi-device experience so much easier.
Yeah, I'm working on slowly a video. I just got done with my like latest mini PC video, and those I just approach them as like all in ones. Like, you can hook this up to your monitor, you can do all these things, you can do video editing on it, you can do your gaming on it, and these are all the examples. I've got another mini PC that Mini Swarm sent over to me, and I just don't want to review it. It's got one of those Core Ultra chips, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with that. So I'm like, maybe this is one where I will just full on turn it into a Steam machine. Like, I'm just going to, like, you know what? Yes, you can use it as a computer. We're not going to do that today. We're going to just make a console. And I got to figure out, Bazite or SteamOS, or, what am I going to use in order to kind of make that environment happen? Am I going to stay within Windows, work within Linux? That's a lot of work up front that I'm going to have to do to kind of figure all that stuff out, because we got so many options. What I'm talking about here is not having options. It's just having a thing you plug into your TV, the Steam machine, or whatever it happens to be. Let somebody else do that work, because that's what people want. They want the convenience of a console. So,
yeah. All right, let's move on and talk about Concord, which just came out, and it's not doing too hot, which not a huge surprise, because there was a lot. It was very, like, people weren't super excited about that. They were comparing it to Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff. I do think that there's a little unfairness happening with Concord right now. I haven't played it. I didn't try the beta. Currently, the all-time peak 2 days ago, 697 players on Steam.
I did not know what number you were going to say. That is so much lower than I thought you were going to say.
Yeah. I think it's a little unfair to look at that number as the number for, like, to show how bad it's doing, because it's also is it first party or second party? It's definitely related to Sony, and so I think that
Firewalk
there's going to be
PlayStation Publishing. Yeah.
Right. So I think that means it's a second party studio, or at least or first party. So most people who are playing Concord are going to be playing on a PlayStation. Like, they're going to be playing on their PS5, right?
Right.
But 697, like, they didn't even break 1,000 on Steam.
Yeah.
That's pretty rough. I saw somebody, I can't remember who it was. I think it was SkillUp. He tweeted out, or he posted on Threads, because that's where he is. He posted on Threads that, I could be mixing up who said this, but the person who said it said something along the lines of, this is a shame. There's some good bones to this game. They should have delayed it and made it free to play and done microtransactions so you can play dress up like you do with Overwatch or whatever, and it might have done really well. But as it stands right now, nobody wants to give it a chance, because it's a hero shooter, and this one is a hero shooter. It's not a MOBA. It's a hero shooter that they started making a long time ago when Overwatch was really popular. And it's just the fact that they saw a trend and they said, this is the trend that we want to chase right now. Hero shooters are popular. We'll make a hero shooter. But it took them years and years to make that hero shooter, and that trend is no longer as interesting to people anymore.
Yeah.
You've got just the market is so saturated. I think before I hit record, you and I were talking about the fact that there's Deadlock, there's Overwatch 2, there's what's the other one that the Marvel something or other, I can't remember. There's a lot of these types of games out there, and people aren't super excited about them. So if you're going to put a game like this out, it should be free to play with microtransactions so that it has a chance. Because right now it does not have a chance.
Well, I was looking, looking at Steam DB, right? So like right now there are 395 players playing Concord, and the all-time peak, or the highest has been, was 697. And then I was like, well, let's pull up Helldivers 2, you know? And so obviously a different style of game, right? But at its peak, 458,000 players. And even just right now, even though I feel like it's not like got the whole zeitgeist thing going on, there's still 30,000 people playing it right now versus 395 total players for Concord.
Which is a brand new game.
Yeah. There's 88,000 people playing Deadlock, and that's invite only. That's right now. There's 88,000 people playing. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's this isn't looking good. I mean, I honestly had no interest in it. As soon as they pulled this out and I watched the trailer and they're like, and here are the stories of these characters, and I'm just like, what does that matter? Like, none of this has any sort of meaning in a game like this. Yes, it's cool to have some lore or whatever, but this isn't the focus of a game like this. You know, it's supposed to be the gameplay and the feel of it. You know, I still don't know the Destiny 2 lore or any of that kind of stuff. You know, it's just about like, how does it feel? How is it going to play? And I think they focused on the wrong things and sold it in the wrong way. You know,
you make a really good point, and it reminds me of another game that was awesome that focused on the wrong thing. And that as I said earlier in the show, my favorite genre of game is the massively multiplayer online role-playing game. And one of my favorites of all time that fell on its face hard is WildStar. And WildStar, oh God, it was so good. WildStar was absolutely fantastic. One of the reasons that it failed, though, was because their marketing was all about, this is the game for hardcore raiders. And if you look at World of Warcraft, for example, the percent of people who are playing that game to do hardcore raiding, very, very small. There's a bunch of people who log in every single day to do a dungeon, craft some stuff, just do some random quests in a zone and chat with their friends. Hardcore raiders cannot support a game on their own. And WildStar, they made this fantastic world with very satisfying combat and some of the best telegraphs that I've ever experienced playing an MMO. Like, you knew exactly where it was safe to stand, and like playing the encounters, you didn't, like you said before, you didn't have to go and watch a YouTube video to learn how to deal with these encounters. The encounters were designed well enough that you could learn the encounters easily by just doing them and being like, and learning from seeing mistakes and be like, okay, that makes sense. But because they marketed it as, this is the game for hardcore players, nobody bought it. And it ended up failing and dying, and you can't play it. Well, maybe you can do like your own servers. I have no idea. But that feels like the same kind of thing where they just marketed to the wrong people with WildStar, and now with what's the name of the game we were talking about?
Concord.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there are so many reasons why I did not want to play Helldivers 2. Number one, it's a sequel to a game I never heard of. Like, what is a Helldiver, and like, why am I going to jump into the second game of it, right? And none of that mattered, because it was just like, no, you can just jump in, and like, who cares? You're just shooting like Starship Trooper aliens, basically, and your character screams, and it's funny, you know, like. Those are the things like that somehow pushed it beyond the envelope. And so, it's one of those things where it's amazing that, I don't know, Concord might be a fun game to play, but I just didn't have any interest based on what I had seen from it. Not my genre really, but neither is Helldivers 2, but I still bought that game and played a little bit of it. I'm loving the Steam DB and .info thing, because I can pull up these charts. So like, yeah, WildStar, peak all time 8.2 years ago was 5,000 players online. That was it. That was the best it ever did. And right now it says 0 players right now. So I guess it's just not
actually
on,
that's
probably Steam though, right?
Yeah, that's only on Steam. And WildStar was one of those games where you would just buy it from its website, and then
yeah.
you wouldn't log in with Steam, and then eventually it came to Steam
Okay.
afterwards. I could be wrong about this. This is all like my memory. So
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense because it was 2016. It looks like is when it came to Steam. So that's a while ago.
All right. Well, Concord, if they switch to free to play, I'll give it a shot. You know, make a switch to free to play. Give all the people who paid money for it, like access to all the skins that come out, because not very many people. That's not a lot of people, and everybody else.
Because it's
go
ahead. I was going to say it's crazy because it's $40. Like it's the same price as Helldivers 2. So it's not a bad price, you know, but it's still not enough. Yeah, so maybe free to play is the only way you can get people in now.
So last episode, you and I were talking about racing games, and I brought up I conflated two games. I mixed them up and kind of put them together about these racing games that are coming out that are inspired by older games. And I said that there was one that I was really looking for, that I wanted to pick up, that was inspired by Sega Rally, and that's not true. The game that I was looking forward to that was not inspired by Sega Rally. It was inspired by another game on Sega systems, and that was Virtua Racing, which I loved Virtua Racing when I was a kid. And so every time I see this game, it's called SPGP, or Super Polygon Grand Prix.
Okay.
That's the game that I was thinking of. But a bunch of people left comments on that video saying that the game that Bill couldn't think of is Over Jump Rally, which is inspired by Sega Rally. And so I just wanted to let people know about those two games. Super Polygon Grand Prix is actually available on Steam right now. It's in early access. It's $15. Inspired by Virtua Racing. And then Over Jump Rally is not actually out yet. Its planned release date is TBA. We don't know what the price is going to be, but that's the one that's more inspired by Sega Rally. So my question to you, Russ, are you a Virtua Racing guy, or are you a Sega Rally guy, or are you a neither?
I'm a Sega Rally guy. I'm like you, where I thought Virtual Racing was amazing back in the day. You know, like Virtual Racing and Virtual Fighter both came out around the same time, and I would like see those in the arcades, and I'm like, holy crap! Like it's like a whole new world, you know. But playing those games, Virtual Racing in particular, is not the best experience for me. And I've played it through 32X. I had it on 32X back in the day, and then also I played the Sega Saturn one through emulation. And yeah, just the controls don't feel right. I think I need a steering wheel or whatever. A couple notes for you too as well. Yeah, I'm definitely more a Sega Rally guy. And another game that people were mentioning besides the Super Jump or Over Jump Rally is one called DDI Rally Championship. That one's also on Steam. And I looked at both, and I think I like the DDI Rally one better. And this one's in early access, but it's only $12, and so I'm probably going to buy it later today. But it looks and feels like Sega Rally Championship as well, and so that's the one that's really kind of caught my attention. The other thing I was going to mention is we talked about like the Daytona USA controls and how they're just kind of fishtaily and not that great, you know. I forgot to mention last week, but the best way to play that is actually through Model 2 emulation. So I did a video about this, I don't know, when the most recent EmuDeck update and added Model 2 and Model 3 emulation. And so I did a whole thing about how to add those in and how to do it. And so if you haven't done that already and you want to play Daytona USA, the Model 2 version actually controls the best. And so I forgot to mention that, but that one's the one where, you know, I used the joystick with that and it feels natural. It feels good, not so fishtaily. Apparently it was just a bad port, you know, that moved over to Saturn and even Dreamcast. And so this one, like, of all the Daytona USA games that I've played, like that one's like, oh, I actually could play this game. Like I could maybe not get 10th place, you know? And so, yeah, check that one out. It's pretty great. The only in Model 2 and Model 3 emulation is very easy. It's just a matter of finding those ROMs, you know? So you're going to have to find that arcade board. You're going to have to dump the data. Just kidding. But anyway, you could probably find a good archive that's going to have it on there. But anyway.
Yeah. So will that run on a device like the RG40, or you're going to want to have to do that on the Steam Deck?
It's a full-on like Windows PC emulator that's been ported over for Steam Deck or for EmuDeck through Proton or whatever they're using for it. It might run natively in Linux, I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, you wouldn't be able to play it on a little handheld. You'd have to play it on the Steam Deck for the most part, or on a PC.
Very cool. All right. Well, I just added that to the show notes, and just so I can remember to look it up later, because DDI Rally
DDI.
Championship looks cool, and Overjump Rally's not out yet. So maybe Overjump Rally should go into early access so that I can give them money right now, because that does look really cool. Before we wrap everything up real quick, I wanted to take a look at the games that are coming out in September, because September is right around the corner. And I'm just looking at the ones that, like, nothing is jumping out to me, or the games that are jumping out to me that I'm looking forward to. The Plucky Squire actually looks pretty cool. That comes out on September 17th for PC, PS5, Switch, and Xbox. So that's a multi-platform system game. Any games that are coming out in September jumping out to you as something that you are going to be buying?
So I will probably be buying Final Fantasy 16 and God of War Ragnarok on PC, and so those are like big releases for me next month. And then the new Zelda game, the one where you play as Zelda, that comes out at the end of September. So I think that's probably like my big. There's a couple other remasters, like there's an Epic Mickey Rebrushed. I don't know, like my oldest son, who's now 15, loved Epic Mickey 2, The Power of Two. You know, he loved that game. And so, I don't know, we might be getting that as a family. And they're remastering Dead Rising. And so that'll be interesting too. PC, PS5, and Xbox. So that'll be cool.
I forgot about the new Zelda game. I think that looks cool. And I love the idea of being able to play as Zelda instead of Link for once. I'm not as excited about that now that I've played the new Zelda style, because that feels like it's going back. That being said, I played, what was the one that it's got the same engine?
Link's Awakening.
Yeah, Link's Awakening on the Switch. Amazing. So fun. So I'll probably end up enjoying this as well, but I forgot about it. I didn't realize it was coming out in September.
I'm just excited about the new like gameplay mechanics, you know what I mean? Like instead of your tried and true like shield and bow and sword and stuff, it feels like there's going to be just new ways to experience that world, just based on her equipment set and everything else. I really haven't watched a lot about it because I want to go into it fresh, but yeah.
That's the kind of thing that Nintendo is just amazing with, always coming up with new mechanics that nobody's ever really done before. So like you're playing and you're like, oh my God, this is really a really new take. Whereas most other companies, they tend to do the same kind of thing over and over and over again. Not that that's a bad thing, because, hey, you know what? I like a good cheeseburger. And if I have a cheeseburger tomorrow, it'll probably be really, really good. But sometimes you want something that's very different. And that's where Nintendo tends to shine. Speaking of Nintendo shining, on this day in gaming history, if we scroll through that list, you can see this is really strange. I didn't even know that this was a thing. Mario Brothers 2 was released on the Commodore 64.
Yeah, I never played that either. It might, I don't know. I guess it's an official port. I never heard of it being on Commodore 64. I had a Commodore 64. I never thought to play Mario.
What was your favorite game on the Commodore 64?
So I got a crazy story about this. So I got my Commodore 64 in 1997. So it's like way past its time, right? But one of my friends, his older brother, or maybe his dad, had one, and he had just this whole computer and everything else. No, not 97. Sorry, a lot sooner than that. So in like 92, 93. And so I had this friend who like, yeah, it's still well after the time, right? Like we were all playing like Super Nintendo, and like that was right as PlayStation was starting to come out, stuff like that. And so we were far beyond that at that point. But this guy was like, I just need to get rid of it. I'll sell you this whole thing for $20, which is a lot of money back then. And I was like, I got $20. And so I bought this guy's Commodore 64, and it just had this like repository of floppy disks with it. And so some of these were just scribbled on, and it's like, I don't know what a lot of these games were. I had to learn how to like code to even launch the games. And sometimes those codes were different per game and stuff, and no internet or anything. And so I'm just like trying to figure this out. So I don't remember playing a lot of games other than just kind of tinkering and trying to get it to work and stuff. There's some racing games, Barbarian. I remember playing Barbarian and thinking it was so cool because I had blood, But the big thing at the time was that we were all waiting for the home console releases of Mortal Kombat, Genesis, Super Nintendo in particular, you know, and there's this whole hubbub about, you know, all the blood and like, you know, Congress is getting involved and they made a rating system and all that stuff, right? And I just couldn't wait to play it because I had seen in the arcades, you know, watched like, you know, Sub-Zero pull off the head with a spine attached to it. And I thought it was so amazing. So I sat down my Commodore 64 and I programmed a Mortal Kombat game, text-based, because I couldn't do anything else at the time. So I would like, it was just like, you would log in or whatever, and be like, okay, which character you want to play? And you'd be like, you have your 3 characters, didn't matter. And be like, okay, I picked Sonya. Okay, you got your opponent, his name is Sub-Zero, you know, and I couldn't even randomly generate anything. I'm just like, it's just a story at that point, you know.
Right.
I'm like, okay, show next line of text, and it'll be like, okay, do you want to kick, punch, or jump kick, you know, that kind of thing. And so you'd pick your thing and be like, oh, you missed or you hit, and again, not randomly generated. It was all just a story. And then he'd be like, okay, do you want to pull off their head, you know, like a fatality and stuff? And I could like make the text turn red. And that was like the coolest thing at the time, you know. So anyway, I made a text-based version of Mortal Kombat for Commodore 64, just lost to time. Like I haven't seen that thing since back then, you know. But that's like my Commodore 64 favorite game. It's Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat by Russ.
By Russ, right?
By Russ.
So,
that's
yeah.
amazing. If there's ever a chance that you can find your save and you can post that someplace, people would love to see that.
I should make like a Pico 8 version. That would be fun because I can actually program on that one. Yeah.
Of course, you probably get sued.
Yeah.
I have a not necessarily a similar story with the Commodore 64. Is like that was my first computer that I owned, was the Commodore 64. I got it for Christmas, and there was a guy. So there's this store in my hometown. It was a department store, and in the basement of the department store, there was a bunch of other stores, right? And there was this guy who had a computer store there, and I don't know how this guy got away with it because nobody knew anything about like piracy or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you could go into that store and you could buy a floppy disk, or you could bring a floppy disk, or you could buy floppy disks from him, and he would make a copy of whatever game you wanted for $2. So you hand him a disc, or you buy a disc, and you'd be like, I want this game, and he would make a copy of it for you for $2, and then you would take that home and be able to play it. And he had Commodore 64 games, he had IBM PC games, and so we would go in and we would get games from there. And one of my favorite games that I played, and I can't remember which one it was because there's multiple on the Commodore 64, it might be the Batman the movie game that's based on the Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson Joker. And like, I remember you're Batman and you're wandering around throwing batarangs at dudes or whatever, and then they had the driving mini game where you're driving and you had to shoot out like a grappling hook to turn at the right time.
Oh wow.
And then you also had this other thing, because in the movie, sorry, spoilers for the 1989 film, in the movie, Joker was poisoning people by combining cosmetics, and so you had to like figure out what were the different cosmetics and what combinations, and I absolutely loved that Batman game. I don't know if that Batman game holds up or if I just loved it because I loved that Batman movie. No way for me to know unless I guess I could launch it and check it out. But
you could throw it on this thing.
I probably have it on here. I have Commodore 64 games because I love the Commodore 64. I actually have, my wife got me the Commodore 64 Mini when that came out. It's in storage right now just because I can't have everything out that we have. But I absolutely love that thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. One more, speaking of Batman, 15 years ago on this date, Batman Arkham Asylum was released. Probably the best, well, I don't want to say the best Batman game because Arkham City's better, I think. But I loved Arkham Asylum. Did you ever play that series?
I did, especially Arkham Asylum. This is Xbox 360 era, and yeah, it was like so different, you know, like you actually did detective work, which I don't think I'd ever seen in a Batman game, you know, like you kind of had to find clues and stuff like that, which is new. And then yeah, that combat system, like it's the tried and true, surrounded by bad guys, pushing the buttons at the right time kind of thing. But they did a really good job, and I think that brought a lot of that forward a little bit. I think some people nowadays still say this is some of the best combat like in that era of them, that kind of whole surrounded by like kind of thing. God of War did a great job with it. I think Spider-Man nowadays is like very similar in that kind of aspect as well. Yeah, I love it. It was a good game.
And then the last thing that I want to talk about before we get out of here, also back in 2011, 13 years ago, the GOG release of Wing Commander 1 and 2. Now, I'm not particularly interested in talking about that, but I wanted to show everybody that there's this guy I follow on Threads named Howie Earl, who's working on remaking Wing Commander. He calls it Wing Leader, so he doesn't get sued, but he's remaking the game. It's actually a 3D game, but he's rendering it to look like sprites.
Yeah, this looks great.
And it looks really, really cool. I'm going to leave a link down below so that people can see it. And if I have time to edit this video instead of just putting up the raw podcast, I will also put like footage over top of us talking about it right now. Were you a Wing Commander fan back in the day? I loved that game.
Not at all. Like I never played like, PC games. Back in the day, so we just didn't have that stuff. And so, yeah, I missed out on that whole era, but yeah, I remember the name, and this looks pretty awesome.
Yeah. I remember playing a lot of Wing Commander, and, I don't remember if it's the first one that had full motion video in it, but, like Mark Hamill was in that game. And I remember, as a kid being like, holy cow, Luke freaking Skywalker's in a video game, and he looks like himself because it was, it was filmed. And it was also the guy, the guy that plays Biff from Back to the Future was in that game as well. It's a weird combination.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. But that's going to do it for this episode of the NerdNest podcast. Russ, you just put out a bunch of videos. What's your next one?
So I think, so my next one is going to be, I think I'm kind of taking a slow roll because I work so much the past 6 videos. The last video I made, the mini PC video, you can see how much work I put into it because I have 4 different changes of clothes in the footage. You know what I mean? Like I'm wearing 4 different outfits because that's how long it took me to do all the filming and whatnot. So I am kind of like slowing things down a little bit. Maybe instead of every other day releases, I'm going to do like every 3 days for a bit. So I think the next one, I haven't decided yet, but I think the next one is going to be on the Mechanism gaming pillow. So that's like, it's been on Reddit and kind of blown up and stuff. So it's a pillow that has an attachment to it, and then you can attach basically anything to it. Steam Deck, ROG Ally, just your like PlayStation controller. They have a whole accessory system. It used to be called like Deckmate, and then they added AlleyMate to it. Now they just call it Mechanism. It's the same guys. And so they sent me the pillow, and it's so stupid. Like it's just like, I'm going to buy a pillow to be able to play a game, but holy smokes, all those like tinglings you get in like your hand when you're trying to play like Steam Deck over time, you're trying to play it in bed or whatever. It solves all that stuff. It looks ridiculous. Really? And you have to like lose a bit of yourself and like, okay, this is just kind of, I'm a gamer now. Like you have to make that decision, because it is not something you can just kind of like accent your couch with. Like that, people are going to look at it and go, what is that? Right. And so it's like, hide it in the closet, but when you're ready to game and you want to be as comfortable as possible and no one else, you don't care about what anyone else says or whatever, this thing's pretty cool. And so it's like $60, I think. Yeah, I'm going to make a whole video about it. I think I'm going to call the title, I guess I review pillows now. That's like what I'm going to call it, because it is pretty amazing. So yeah,
that's very cool. Yeah, I have the Mechanism stuff here in the Nerd Nest. Shoot, what the heck is it called? The kickstand that they have for the Mechanism thing is incredibly satisfying to just hold in your hand and like mess with the springs a little bit. Yeah. It's so well constructed. They do a very good job with that.
I found it to be the best kickstand I've ever used. Like for any handheld or whatever, it's still my favorite kickstand. Only thing about it is that I like to use my kill switch case, and so I got to take the case off to put the mechanism thing on it to load that on. Mechanism, they provide their STL files on their website for free, and so if you just got a 3D printer, you have all that stuff, just do it yourself. Like they're cool with that,
Yeah.
And then they sell accessory packs. Like, oh, you want our springs? Here's just the springs, So yeah, a lot of cool things with this company.
Yeah, I like Mechanism. I think that they make good stuff. I usually don't keep their stuff on my hardware just because I don't really need a kickstand, and like they have VESA mounts and stuff. I'm like, who's VESA mounting their Steam Deck?
Right.
You know what? Somebody is somewhere. Everybody's like, who's doing this? Somebody is. Otherwise it wouldn't get made. But that's going to do it for this episode of the NerdNest podcast. Go subscribe to Russ's channel, Retro Game Core on YouTube. And before you leave, make sure you subscribe here as well. You guys could have spent an hour and a half anywhere, but you hung out with us, and I appreciate that. Take it easy, everybody. Stay rad.